Okay, I'm starting everything right now. So we are recording and we're also on YouTube as of now. The first committee is planning and zoning. So Mr. Burley, if you're okay, we can get started.
Yes, I am. Let's start.
Okay, I just have one note I want to pass on to you. You see my outstanding items, just reminders there, but a few days ago, I was contacted by Mr. Silversmith in an email who wanted to know if his property was in a Keystone Opportunity Zone. And I told him, as far as I know, it is not. And I did double check that online, and it is not. A Keystone Opportunity Zone, I have this on your notes, gives some state and local tax benefits to qualified applicants. Um, and you can go on their website and it will show you that, but we are not there. But he was apparently contacted by a Cindy Badano, who's development manager from Wallach Communities that is in Ohio. And they specialize in senior and affordable housing. And they told him they were interested in the site, but wanted some assistance. And we're looking for the Keystone Opportunity Zone assistance. Now, all he did was ask me if we were in one, and I told him no. That's all I really had from him, nothing more. So I don't know that there's anything more to do right now, but I at least wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
It's like, is that the area where you have to be a certain level of distressed community to qualify?
I think so, but I
Yeah,
didn't go into all the guidelines.
We looked into it a little while back when we were trying to do a business development thing, and we didn't qualify because we're not a distressed community. So when we're looking at COVID relief, and there's nothing between being fine and being in Act 47, that was one of the things that we suggested, that they might want to expand the eligibility for Keystone Opportunity Zones to encourage development in communities that weren't in distress, but didn't qualify for that kind of a tax incentive, because it would cost.
In this case, I don't know if you want that for that particular property though, but
Whatever.
in any case, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. I don't know anything more about this. I don't know anything more about Wallach Communities. All I know is he had that question, and that was it. So I don't know if there's anything more we need to do about that, or if you need to have anything legally done, or Mr. Corbel looking at anything, but I just wanted to pass that on to you so you're aware of it.
Hey, Steve, has Mr. Silversmith said anything about any Westinghouse involvement?
To me, no. If you mean Mr. Corbel, I don't know. But to me, he hasn't, no.
Because at one time they were thinking about getting involved because they want to save their image with the Atom Smasher.
Yeah, and you know what? There was somebody else who apparently had asked about that, but they disappeared. This was not a very long time ago, but they kind of disappeared. There was somebody actually who had asked for permission to go on the property, and I told them I could not give them permission. I gave them Silversmith's phone number in DC to contact. I don't know if they ever did or not. I have the name probably written down in my phone notebook somewhere if anybody wants to know. I don't think he was anybody who was looking at to raise funds to do anything with it, though. I think he just wanted to go on and take some photos, but he didn't really say anything more than that, and I just gave him Silversmith's number.
Okay. Don, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Bill.
Any more complaints about the rodents and the varmints in that neighborhood up there going across?
Occasionally, nothing to be worried about.
Okay.
Well, that's all I have, Bill. Mr. Burley, if no one has any questions for me.
Any more comments on Silversmith? Don, did you have anything else you want to tell to us?
Yeah, I have a few things here I'd like to cover. It's good to be back. This is my first time on Zoom. So since I've been back after my surgery, I have written 76 violation letters for high grass, weeds, and garbage since we had that rainy spring. So that kind of put things up pretty good. But 76 letters was quite a bit. Normally, in a lot of situations, I will try to talk to the resident in person. But in this case here, since COVID came into play, I just send out strictly letters. So there's 76 violation letters that have been mailed.
Okay.
So this year, I guess because of the COVID, everybody's doing remodeling and so on and so forth. But I've come across, or I issued 21 dumpster permits that I think is probably the highest that I can ever remember since I've been on the job. That's a zoning situation, but since I'm out on a patrol, I kind of take care of them. And I issued 21 permits, so that's a high as far as I know. Right now, we have 14 citations at the magistrate's office for different things, high grass, weeds, garbage, all that stuff. So we have 14 citations at the magistrate's now, and I had 3 hearings last week. So that's pretty much it as far as the borough. And I understand that there's some sidewalk problems, which I've already addressed one at the top of the hill of the Greensburg Pike, right past Wolf Funeral Home. As you're coming up the hill, coming towards the borough building, there's a stretch there where there's a section that's out of control a little bit. And I talked to the owner. It's a rental property, and he's in Vegas. So he's pretty much letting me handle stuff to get it taken care of for him because he's in Vegas. So I'm working on that. That's about it for as far as the borough goes. One thing I'd like to talk about, we have a situation down at the corner. This is probably more for Steve Corbel, at the corner of Lenox and Atlantic Avenue. As you're going down the hill, it'd be the last house on the left, right at the corner of Atlantic and Lenox. There's a tree, which is not a borough tree. It's a private tree. And I know that the borough doesn't like to get involved with private trees, but this is a situation that I think that we need to address. The tree is severely leaning, and there's a lot of school children down there that wait on that corner for the bus. They get off, get on. And I noticed the other day, there's several big, heavy dead limbs up in that tree. So Steve, I'd like to know how you feel about it and if there's anything that the borough can address that situation. It's a very dangerous situation. The tree's leaning something terrible. I'm surprised it hasn't already come down.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. When you have a situation with a tree on private property that's, posing a potential risk to health and safety, the first step is to try to contact the owner and have the tree removed or remedied by the owner. And then failing that, if the borough is inclined to do so, we could take down the tree and then charge the costs to the property owner. And if they don't pay, file a lien. That's typically how we've handled these in the past. So it's really up to council. I mean, I'll know, Don, if there's a property owner involved or you have a way to contact them, or I don't know if it's that might be one of those problem properties where we don't know or there's nobody around.
Well, it's there's definitely someone there because I see activity basically all the time when I'm.
Yeah, well, then we should try to get them to cut it down first. I mean,
Mr. Blais? Mr. Blais?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'd like to speak to this issue. If there's a problem with kids and getting on and off a bus, I would suggest that you contact the school district or the bus company ASAP and have them move the bus stop up the street or down the street or wherever you have to and get them away from the tree. The idea that we got to take that tree down and you got to notify people, et cetera, could take months. So I would suggest acting as fast as you can, get the kids moved away from that area.
I totally agree, Bill, because last thing we want to have happen is an accident that we're going to regret, because those trees, the wind's been blowing really hard and those trees are getting weaker and weaker. So I think it's a great idea. How can we go about doing it? What's the next move to do it? Mr. Corbel, maybe?
Why don't you go ahead and contact
Bill, you're muted.
I'm muted.
Bill,
No, Bill Tomasic is muted.
Okay.
so Bill Burley, this is Mayor Porto. Why don't you either direct Steve Morris to contact the school district's administration building. You want to speak with Siobhan Nicola, who's the director of transportation, and that's how you'd start that process.
Okay, Frank, that sounds wonderful. Steve, would you do that, please?
Yes.
Because, yeah, it's, I really think that it is something we should handle right away. Tommy, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, that sounds fine. As well as send the property owner a letter as well to start that process on that end. Get
That's
that
not a
taken
bad
care of.
idea. Also do something in writing, Tom. I agree. Dawn, next time you're in, let's talk about it and I'll call Siobhan. I want to make sure I have the right location.
Okay, I'll be in the morning.
Okay. Patty, you have anything to say about it?
I'm fine.
Okay, all right, great. Anything else, Don?
That's all I have.
Okay,
Bill, I had one question for Dawn.
yes.
Dawn, I'm assuming we're getting ready to advertise for 2021 tree pruning, I would assume. Is that correct? I just
Correct.
want to make it's on the
Correct.
radar.
Correct.
Okay, well, it looks like we're rolling into a section here that has to do with any other planning and zoning concerns or things
Did
that
the
you
last time.
want to talk about. Hello? Hello?
Bill?
Yeah, we're
Yes,
here.
I'm here. I have one more
Well,
item, number 4.
Sorry, I froze.
That's all right. Okay. Um,
Dawn, did you hear what I said?
I did, Bill, yes.
Okay,
That'll
I just wanted to
probably
make sure that that's on the
start,
radar.
Oh, it's definitely on the radar, yes. I take the arborist with me and he and I ride around the burn. We take certain sections and that's the way we do it to make sure we
Okay.
don't get it. I do also have a lot that I've had calls during the season of people complaining about different situations over wires, over their roofs, over their driveways. I've got those all logged. I start a tree log. So those also have to be taken care of beside the bidding process.
Okay, so I'm assuming that'll go out to bid probably next month or the month after.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dawn.
Sure.
I have a comment.
yes, Patty.
When you're looking at the specs for our tree service, I hope that you keep in consideration the fact that we'd like to preserve the tree canopy in good health so that we look at, proper preventive pruning. They just had a big maple tree in the Woodland Hills school lot lose the whole crown because that poor tree hasn't been thinned or pruned or anything for decades. And when you get these heavy storms, they just get too top heavy and they break. If you can treat them like we had a number of the trees down on Cherry Valley pruned to get them thinned out and stabilized, then they're not going to come crashing down on people. When you get accumulations of dead wood in the crown, or you get them top heavy, that's when you end up with danger. It's a good thing to keep as many of these trees in healthy condition as we can. To have a tree process that just involves removal of problem trees, that's really not a solution. And I think we have to be respectful of the fact that these trees are absorbing a lot of the stormwater runoff issues that we have, and they
Right.
provide a lot of other amenities to the town. So I don't want to be too slap happy with the buzzsaw. If there's a way that we can protect our canopy and encourage our residents to do the same.
Well, a lot of our pin oaks, Patty, they're very full, as you might want to say, and they definitely need thinned out. And that's what we've been doing for the last year in our pruning process, where we thin the tree out so that the air can flow straight through without tipping the tree over or doing some severe damage.
Right. I have
And
I have 2 pin oaks over 100 years. I get the crown thinned every 20% every 3 years in
Yeah,
order to keep them stable, because otherwise they get top heavy, and when especially they get ice or when they're wet with leaves, they get top heavy and then they're going to break.
sure, exactly. Yeah, we have been doing that.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments regarding trees or sidewalks or anything else? I guess we're done, Steve.
Okay, I need a few seconds to turn to finance, and then we're going to bring Ameriserve in here also in a couple of seconds. Just give me some time here.
Okay.
Okay, I can start finance now if everyone's okay. I will I will make Mary Lou Mandicek from Ameriserve a panelist in a few seconds here. Patty, is it okay to start?
Yes, please. Mr. Morris has the floor. You have a great deal to share with us tonight.
Okay, I just promoted Mary Lou to a panelist. Mary Lou, are you on and can you hear us? I'm not sure if she's there. Mary Lou Mandicek from Ameriserve, are you there? Mary Lou and Frank?
Yes, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I'm here with Frank Lipinski. We're both here.
Okay, so we can get started. I did distribute a copy of what Frank had sent me to everyone. I don't know if you need to be able to access the screen to show it, Frank, or if you want me to show it, just let me know.
If you could show it, Steve, that would be great.
Okay, give me a few seconds here and I will get it up on the screen. Okay, Frank, I have it up with the cover sheet. Just let me know when you want to turn the page.
Okay, we could go ahead and turn the page. Thanks, Steve. One more. And we go one more yet. All right, well, good evening to all the members. This review, if you take a look up in the right-hand corner, it's up through 8/31 of 2020. So if we take a look at the pie in the left-hand corner, you can see that the largest color is shaded in green, which is equity or the stock market. As of 8/31, we had 65% in the stock market, 34% in fixed income, and the cash, we keep just what we need to pay out each month. And this is for the police pension. If you look down the right-hand corner, we'll walk through the year. We start out the year with $8,666,347. We've had net contributions less withdrawals. We had a net outflow of $333,000. The account for the first 8 months of the year made $942,150 to end up at $9,275,439, which is 11.51% for the first 8 months. That's versus the markets that did 9.5%. So it did very well. Yep. If there's no questions on that, Steve, the next page, please. Okay, if we take a look here at the middle of the page towards the right, you'll see the inception date on this account was 8/31 of 09. So we start out back there at 8/31 of 09 with $3,914,392. Throughout the 11 years that we've been managing it, we've had a total net outflow of $1,432,000. The account made a total over 11 years of $6,793,467. Again, to end up at $9,275,000 at the end of August. The annualized return for 11 years was 10.71% versus the index. Any questions on the performance?
That's great.
The next several pages, Steve, you could go through. It's just, again, it's our makeup of our holdings, and you could go ahead and go through those. And then in section 2, we have the employee's pension, and we're looking at a very similar picture. It's up through 8/31. If you take a look at the pie up in the left-hand corner, this account had an allocation to the equity or stock market at the end of August at 65%. 34% was in fixed income. And once again, we only keep cash. I actually raise cash every month for the payout, and so it was very small. Down the right-hand corner, you could take a look how it performed for the year. Start out at 3,177,244 net outflows of 113,000 for the first 8 months. And this account made $346,562 for 8 months, which ended up to be $3,410,000 in value. Again, it was 11.52% return. It was a strong return for 8 months versus the markets of 9.5. And then finally, on the next page over, we see the inception period. Again, this account started 8/31/09, 11 years ago. We start out with 1,646,420. Net outflows of 876,000. The account made total over 11 years, 2,640,153. The annualized return, again, for 11 years was 10.8%, a strong return for 11 years. We are staying within your objective. It's a balanced, we're on the upper end of the balanced objective. Any questions on either one of these two accounts in their performance?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just wanted to know, when you're tracking the direction of the market for the coming year, do you see a need to make any adjustments in our investment strategy based on the expected performance of the markets?
And that's a very good question. The two things that are mainly going to affect the market in the next 12 months. Number one, the election, which is coming up in a very short term. And two is the COVID pandemic that we are having. Interest rates are going to stay very low. The Federal Reserve has determined to keep rates low. With that said, the only arena to really play in over the next year or two will be the stock market to gain any type of return. So if we get a vaccine, it was funny, today on CNBC, President Trump came out and said, basically a week before the election, they're going to have some type of good news, of course, for a vaccine. Once the vaccine comes about, these markets are going to once again go into what we consider to be a mini bull market, because there is so much money, more than ever, sitting on the sidelines waiting for this vaccine. The election, the markets haven't really, if President Trump wins, life will go on as usual. If Biden ends up winning the election and he wants to raise taxes, it may cause a correction in the market in the near term. But to answer your question, I believe we should stay the course. The stock market is a better place over the next 12 to 18 months than it would be in a fixed income arena. And if anything changes, all of your investments are very liquid. I could move backwards in a heartbeat very quickly to take you to a lower exposure to the stock market. I see a better picture over the next 12 to 18 months in the stock market.
Thank you.
Patty, I have a question.
Yes.
You're like better than the index by about 1%. If I take into account your fees, how would that look if you deduct your fees?
Our fees are 0.5%, correct? Or 60 basis points.
Yes.
Our fees are 60 basis points. It's a little bit over 0.5%.
So we would be still beating the index by a little bit.
Yes, sir.
That's included in that number,
Right,
isn't it?
right.
Okay.
What?
Any other?
9.8 and 9.8. So is your fee already included in that?
Our fee, this is a gross percentage return. So if you take 10.8%, the one we're looking at right now, 10.8% annually, you could take off 60, so it'd be 10.2% annually versus a 9.79 of the index.
Yes. Because if you have an index tracking fund, you pretty much pay almost no fee. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Any other questions? Mary, you anything?
If no one has any questions, I would just like to let all of you know that I have decided to retire from AmeriServe after 25 plus years. And I just want to thank you for allowing me to service your account for the last 11 years. You've all been very kind. At the present time, they have selected Dennis Hunt, who is a member of my team who will succeed me in handling the account administration of your plan. And I will be working with Dennis over the next couple of weeks to transition him over so that he understands the workings of the account, and he will be working with Frank going forward. So I just want to say thank you to all of you.
Well, thank you, Mary Lou. You've been very attendant to our needs, and I appreciate your service over all this time. I wish you all the best.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Congrats on your retirement.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Lou.
All your efforts.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Mary Lou, myself, and AmeriServe, thank you again for your business. Have a good evening.
Thank you so
You
much.
too, thanks. We'll
Okay.
take you off here.
Thank you.
We'll release you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, I have several items to report on that could take some time. So what I did was try to give you as much in the way of notes as possible on the sheets that I gave you. So I will share my screen on a few of these so you can see what we're talking about if you just bear with me here. The first item is cash flow year to date.
It would be good to put that one up.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that to go. Okay, I know I have it. Go back to Frank, and if I do that, there we go. I'm just first going to show you the statistics side. The red line here, the heavy red line, is the one that's this year. And entering September from August, our cash was at 1.19 million, which is pretty representative of where we've been the last 4 or 5 years. The thing that helped that, as I mentioned in my notes, is the 125,000 in COVID relief that we got. If you recall, I mentioned that we were only going to be able to use certain things. So the easiest thing to do was to submit police salaries, which is what we did. We could have submitted other things too, but that was the one that would have the least requirement for evidence and things like that. So we submitted police salaries and got the 125,000 in COVID relief, and that was it enabled us to come back up to a little bit better situation than we were the previous month. If you notice, when you look at, this is the spreadsheet of expenses, and over here is police, where you see where I have the little I bar there, and you'll notice that's a negative number. That's negative because when we got the $125,000, we had to do something bookkeeping wise, and that's what we decided to do, was just to charge it against police salaries. So it is obviously not a negative. It's a negative because of the 125,000. So it's very positive as far as the cash flow is concerned. And again, realize that 125,000 is not extra money you have to spend. It's money that's used to compensate us for the extra money that we had to spend with COVID. And we have other things we could also apply for should any further relief be offered. But right now we don't know of anything. So we're keeping an eye out though, and we're hoping that FEMA or PEMA will have something. And of course, if the federal government decides to get their act together, they might provide some help to state and local government. We just don't know. Does anybody have any questions about cash flow?
Steve, where does the COVID accumulation of costs, extra costs occur in this list? Does it have a separate line of its own?
You know, Wendy started putting a line item in under expenses, administration expenses.
Okay,
And
under
when you look at the monthly, look at administration,
okay,
that doesn't include police salaries, of course. It just other non-salary costs.
Yeah, because I know when I'm looking at the bills, I see a lot of things like for extra cleaning equipment and mops and disinfectant and cleaning service stuff. I'm sure that's not stuff we would normally spend.
Right. Well, we would buy some of it, but not as much as we're buying. And we bought a little bit more than we had to in some cases just to get the stuff when it was available. Anybody else have any questions about that? Well, let me go to the MMO reports. One of the handouts I gave you was this. This is the typical MMO report you get from Mockenhop, and I gave you 3 pages of this, but let me, instead of showing you that, show you the notes I have here well, it's not going to do that. Why not?
Yeah, it's there.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
It didn't show on mine. I wonder why. Okay. Wait a minute. I got to go back. I see what happened. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back again to that. I'm sorry. I'm working with 2 screens, and so I sometimes forget that. In any case, all right. The MMO summary is here. So you can see what the summary was for 2020 and what the MMO calculation is for 2021 and what the difference is. Police is a significant increase. We've been expecting that usually. Non-uniform, and then the other defined contribution is minor. This again, just to refresh your memory, reflects the full amount that is due for each MMO. If you recall, 2 years ago was the last year we were able to take 75%. And so again, just to remind you, we banked 25% each of those 4 years. And that's why when you look at, and I don't think I have it on my screen here, but when you look at the numbers that Wendy gives you every month in the treasurer's report, you'll see a list of all the different accounts, and one of them is pension reserve. And it will show you probably right now, if you were to look at it, 1.1 million. That's because as she prepares to pay it for the year, this is about the last quarter of the year when we normally pay this. She puts the money aside out of the general fund into the pension reserve. And that's what she's done with this as well. So that's why it's 1.1 million. She's getting ready to pay what we owe. We haven't gotten state aid yet, so we don't know what that will be. But if you see in my list for 2020, we budgeted 120,000. But in previous years, if you look at I'm looking at this one this section right here. If you look at this, previous years, we've always been ahead of what we budgeted as far as state aid. I don't know that's going to happen. We use these numbers that you see here from 17, 18, 19, and 20 because those were the numbers Mockenhop had recommended to us. So hopefully there'll be more than 120,000 coming in. Okay. So then she will pay that out of that pension reserve fund, and it will go down to where we have that extra 25% that we had put aside. And so the real balance in the pension reserve is probably somewhere around $600,000 to $700,000, which is a good number, but that's to be used to pay off the excess that we didn't, the money we didn't pay those previous 4 years in 2018, 17, 16, and 15. Am I being clear? I'm going to stop here for a minute. Am I being clear? Does anybody have any questions about that so far?
So we've put money in the bank in advance in order to cover this expense when it's due, and it's due now.
Right. When we did that back then, because we had the money at the time to do it, and council advised that was the prudent thing to do, was to put the money aside. So we did. So if you look at what these numbers here for 2021 show is what should be in the budget. Police, of course, goes in the police budget. Non-uniform goes, and non-uniform and the other defined contribution goes in the administration budget. And to offset that, we put an estimate in of what we think our state aid will be. And then, of course, that's never enough to cover it. So that's why I did this little calculation down here. If everybody can see this bullet point where I say the difference from the 2018 amounts, right there. I'm comparing, I'm comparing the 2018 amounts to show you what the difference would be, and how much we would have to take from the pension reserve accounts to be able to balance and not have to, for example, raise taxes or find the money somewhere else. So I'm recommending that we take this $252,624 from the pension reserve in 2021, and I would put that in the budget like I have the last 2 years as a revenue, a transfer from reserve to general fund. And that would allow us to balance. Hopefully, if we end up with more state aid than we expect, we can take less out of the pension reserve. But if we don't, then we would need to take that full amount out. Now, if you don't have any questions about that, I would add finally about the MMO, that council always has to approve the MMO by motion in September. So this would be on your September 16th agenda, those 3 MMO amounts for your approval. And then I would sign off on it. And then as we go into October, we'll get state aid. I'll let you know how much that is, et cetera. And we'll go from there. But does anybody have any questions about the MMO?
It seems like we're in a prudent position for this, and we'll remain with a pension reserve fund even after we take out this allocation to pay this year. So I think we're keeping contemporaneous with our obligations, and I think it's in good shape. And thank you for your analysis. Anybody else have a question about what's going to happen when we vote on this? You all good?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let me go on to my next section then on the 2021 budget preparation. You can see that on the notes I gave you. I'm not going to put my screen on here because I'm not going to read all this. You can read most of it. Item 1, I'm going to spend a little bit. D1, I'm going to spend just a few minutes on. The Environmental Advisory Council for the first time submitted a budget. They also submitted a capital item, and I'm going to show you that on screen real quick, just so that you can see that. Okay, it should be behind all this stuff here. Well, there it is. Okay. They submitted money for the general fund, but also money to improve the bird sanctuary. And I took what they gave me and divided it into general fund, which is more immediate costs, and capital, which would be the bird sanctuary. So you can read this. I'm not going to go into it. This is their plan for improving the bird sanctuary. And of course, this will go to borough property, since this is a borough property item, for October consideration. And then borough property will then recommend what they want finance committee to do, as all the other committees will do with their capital items. And I'll talk more about capital in a minute. So you should have gotten this in the email I sent you. Okay. So I split it up. Their budget request for the general fund is $3,815. And again, there's information that I will have in my notes for the October meeting when I present you a draft budget that will tell you what they're looking to do with that. If anybody wants to see it in advance, I'm happy to share it, but I didn't put it on here right now. So $12,000 some dollars for the capital budget is what they're estimating in that packet, and then $3,800 for the general fund. So again, this would be all stuff that you have to review and approve. This is not something that's just automatic. And then my second item under point D, every year I usually give you a long list of things for every committee, different questions and things to consider whenever you're preparing the budget. And I do that to show people that council doesn't just approve a budget out of thin air, that they do consider a lot of different items. And that's why I included my budget message in the budget book. This year with the COVID pandemic, I decided I wasn't going to do that. The explanation you see under item D2, though, is the explanation I usually give you as to why I think it's important that council consider all sorts of things whenever they're considering the budget. But I just don't see a reason, and I'm going to go back to my notes here to share on screen. I don't see a reason to give you that list all over again and have you review all those things. You already know that there's a lot of different things to consider, and you can look at the budget book if you want to see that. What I did list here, though, on your notes are some considerations about the budget and a recommendation I'm going to make as I prepare the 2021 budget. The three main revenue sources that we've been concerned about because of the COVID-19 pandemic has been earned income tax, RAD receipts, and real estate tax receipts. They're three of the bigger items for revenue. We know that earned income tax is going to decrease this year from previous year, but if you look at my notes, we also assume when we budgeted for 2020 that the impact would not be the same. Let's see, I'm sorry, my phone just rang and I got a telemarketer calling me. Anyway, we assume we budgeted for 2020 that we weren't going to get in the same amount we got in 2019. In 2019, we got in $1.1 million, but we only budgeted for 2020 $997,000 in revenues for earned income tax. That's about a 10% less expectation that we had for 2020 versus 2021. The reason why I point that out is if you looked at the numbers that Wendy has given us for earned income tax through the year, we're at about 2% behind where we were for 2019. I'm sorry, I'm living in the past for 2019, and yet I budgeted 10% less. So we have some room there that we might be pretty close, if not hit our mark for revenues for earned income tax. We might not go over, but we might get pretty close to that 997,000 and maybe actually hit around that number. The same thing is true for RAD. When I budgeted for RAD in 2020, I budgeted less than we actually received in 2019. In 2019, we took in 247,000. You can see that right here. But I budgeted 229. That's about a 7% less amount than we took in 2019. Again, for the RAD year to date, we're only about 5% difference from 2019 through the end of August. So again, we have that buffer and we might come in pretty close to that number for RAD. And then finally, real estate tax, it may decrease this year because people may hold off on paying. Also because council extended the time for paying a discount, and also council extended the time to pay at face value through year end. But regardless, the real estate tax is not something that's going to be easily forgiven. People are still going to have to pay it, whether they pay it delinquent or pay it on time. So we're probably going to be pretty close to the amount of money we budgeted. We may not hit it, we're going to be pretty close. And if you look, the certified value for the county that was provided by the county in January was $380,841,000. But the value they have us at for 2020 so far through the end of August is $380,916,000. So our total assessed value has gone up. And as I mentioned, I talked about cash flow, that's been average. That's returned to an average. So let me stop sharing here a minute and go back to my picture. The bottom line is, as I'm preparing the 2021 budget, my suggestion is that we try to stay as close as we can to what we budgeted for 2020. There's going to be some increases in expenses, but at the same time, hopefully, if things work out with the pandemic, there's also going to be recreation programs coming back and the pool coming back. And while we lose money with the pool, we're losing a lot more this year than we ordinarily would because of the pandemic, as the revenues are just nowhere close to what we had expected. So as I'm preparing the 2021 budget, what I'm trying to do is stay fairly close to 2020. I'm not going to make a big difference in it. The numbers you see in the 2020 budget are going to be fairly close to 2021. Now, Wendy's reviewing personnel issues for me and costs, et cetera, and we'll take a look at how that affects us. And when I give you the first draft in October, you'll have a better idea of whether I'm able to balance using this strategy. But I think that makes sense to do. And unless you have any objections or any questions about it, that's what I'm aiming to do. Go ahead.
Marcus has a question.
Like items which you know are affected heavily by COVID-19, like the pool, why don't you use like 2019 as a baseline?
We could,
Like a
sure.
hybrid, like things which are obviously affected, like a lot, more
Yeah,
than 10%. I would use 19 as a baseline.
okay. We could do that.
Also, anyone else have a question at this point? Tommy, Bill? I wonder, do we have an idea of whether we have absolutely lost businesses? I just sent a letter out for the Environment Advisory Council. I think we'll get some indication if we get a bunch back that are, declining to answer or something. But do we have an idea of whether our business revenues is going to be significantly down?
Oh, well, basing it on what we've taken with local services tax,
Yeah,
we may not have lost businesses, but we definitely lost some employees.
yeah,
So some businesses obviously some did shut down for a time too.
yeah.
And some are just starting to come back. So that's one indication that there's been, some regression there. But as far as whether or not any have actually closed, we haven't heard of very many. But I don't know that for a fact, no.
Because I know when I mailed out the list, I was looking at all of them, and there were like several on our list of businesses of 145 that aren't in business anymore, like Jake's Pizza, for example. They've been gone for a while, and we don't have the new tenant on the updated list. So I don't know how contemporaneous our business tracking list is. I was pretty frustrated that we don't have a good handle on, who is actually in town doing business. A lot of operating companies, I'd like to have a better handle on that than we do.
Okay.
All right.
The only other item I had under Part D was just some general comments with the 2021 budget, and you can read them. I'm not going to go into that unless you have some questions. There's only one other item I have if you don't have any questions about the budget. And obviously, let me also add capital improvements. Don't forget, you'll be reviewing in October by committee first, and then referring it to finance in November. And that should also be where you begin to think about what you're going to use bond issue funds for. Okay, just so you're aware of that. The only other item I have is this. If you remember last month, I gave you DAC's recommendation that we put policies and procedures in place regarding the bond issue. And the notes I had were about the middle of what I show you in item E. But the question had been, what did they mean by a reference to section 3? And I found out that there is no section 3, obviously. They put that in there in error. What they meant was section C. They wanted to make sure you were okay with their definition for working group. So I reprinted all of section C on the sheet I gave you. Maybe it'd be helpful if I shared the screen real quick on that too.
Yeah, would you explain that a little bit, Steve? Because
well, yeah, this really isn't anything unusual.
no.
It's saying that the borough has established a disclosure working group consisting of our treasurer and me. Wendy is finance officer and treasurer combined, and of course me. And we already do this stuff.
Great.
For example, you'll see things in here about referring to Emma. Emma is one of the disclosure things that were put into place. It's down here in this paragraph right here by the SEC. And what Emma requires us to do every year is put our audit online, among other financial data. We already do that. DAC can help us with that, but for right now, we don't necessarily need to do that. In fact, probably in a year or two, we'll want to discuss whether or not you want to maintain DAC as a resource. You might, but we'll talk more about that later. So all that they're doing is establishing the disclosure working group as myself and Wendy, which we're already doing anyway. And then they're mentioning that disclosure representative is Wendy, the treasurer. And all that means is that she is the person preparing all the appropriate filings and documents for filing. And while she doesn't do all of it herself, some of it is me, a little bit of it is Allison. Basically, she does that. So there's nothing really unusual there.
Yeah, that's perfect.
There's nothing really unusual there. So if you're okay with that, Mike McCaig recommends that it's a good idea to approve these policies and procedures or make up our own. I don't know that it makes sense to make up our own because the SEC requires many more things now for reporting because of past problems they've had with municipal bonds and other things, not just municipal bonds. So
do we need a motion on our business meeting to approve this?
yeah, I would do that. I would put a motion to vote on the 16th if you're okay with that.
Anyone have any questions about this or the need for it?
Well, if there's no questions from any of the stuff I've submitted to you so far on my agenda, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you very much I know this is a lot of diligent work and I know this budget is going to be a little more challenging than some because we're facing a number of uncertainties, but I think we're in pretty good shape. And I think we're going to get through this just fine. I have a couple of other things here. The electric supply procurement that we're with the Western Pennsylvania Energy Consortium, they are up for renewal if we're going to remain in the consortium for our electric supply service, which we do as part of a multi-state consortium, which lowers our prices considerably. This is simply a renewal of a program that we've been in for a while. I think I sent around to you the PowerPoint that they gave us with it, and we will have an option in a few months about whether we want to go into the 100% renewable choice or not. We don't need to make that decision tonight, just to whether we're going to stay in the consortium or not. And we will need to vote on that. So I wanted to ask what your pleasure is regarding staying with the Western Pennsylvania Energy Consortium that we've been with for a while. Any objections or concerns? Any questions? Okay, it's basically allows us to have multiple year stability in our utility prices because we negotiate a contract.
Can you stop working?
What? Okay. All right. So if there's no objection or concern, we can put that on for a vote in September, Steve. Thank you. And are there any other finance issues that we need to raise that anyone would like to bring up at this time? Any other concerns? All right, then that ends our committee meeting. Mr. Morris, we're done.
Okay, just give me a few seconds and I will turn to committee of the whole.
Thank you. While you're doing that, can I just update people? The surveys for the climate action plan are coming in. We've received back over 100 already. And I encourage any of you who haven't sent them in to please do so. And we did send a letter out to all the businesses in town asking for their participation in one of 3 roundtable groups. We're going to do some feedback sessions in person rather than send them a survey because they're real different. So any of you who are interested, you know, I'm happy to have you join that conversation as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'm okay, Mr. Tomasic, if you're ready. Okay, manager's update. Manager's update. I just had 2. Whoops, sorry, my computer is talking to me. Hold on one second. I want to stop it. I think I just did. P Municipal League. You should have seen an email from me. They're of course holding their annual conference virtually, and every year they have a number of different resolutions they review and approve, as well as elect new officers at that conference. And the resolutions usually indicate the direction they want to go as a group, as far as lobbying the state legislature on various items, and other things. So they had asked in that email that every community should appoint a delegate to represent the community at the virtual conference this year, which will be done, I think, via Zoom in October. And I'm not sure how you want to go about doing that. I think you have, excuse me, I think you have a little bit of time because I don't think it has to be in right away. But usually, typically, there's somebody would volunteer or the president would appoint somebody or both, however you want to do it. I just want to call that to your attention. I don't know if you need to discuss that or not, or if you want me to move on. Move on? Okay. I'll put that as a reminder on notes for the meeting on the 16th, like I do. And that way, if you need to discuss it a little bit on the 16th, you can. Every year at the last quarter of the year, I give you my usual end of the year reminders. And you'll see that on your committee of the whole report. And just since it's the first time I've done it for a while here, maybe I should turn to that real quick and show it to you on screen. That's this reminder here. In September, you have to approve MMO, which we talked about. Trash contract sometime September, October. You have to accept the final, the final year in this case, or you have to decide if you're going to rebid it. If you accept the final year for the trash contract, it goes from $14.97 per unit per month to $15.41 per unit per month. Now, that's not what the trash fee will end up being. I have to calculate that out and put in other costs that go into that. But regardless, you have to do a motion to either go out and bid it or accept the option year. In this case, it's the last year of this 5-year contract. And then also in September, if nobody has brought up Chalfont, we continue those agreements because you're supposed to discuss that with the opposite party before September 1st. And no, there was no discussion. I know there's got another year or two to run on the Chalfont Police and Public Works agreements. You can see what the other things are for the other months. I'm not going to go into detail.
Steve, hold on 1 second, please.
Go ahead.
On the September items, the MMO approval, we generally send a copy to Mike Palumbo for a review. The trash contract is what we basically will approve anyway. And on the Chalfont agreements, I suggest that we have on there the agenda that we continue these without any interruption, contingent upon, agreements from both parties. So I don't have anybody suggesting that they don't want to continue them or revise them. So I would put that on as a contingency for approval.
Oh, I'll just mention that I'll just put it as part of the general report then, because that we're continuing. There's no vote needed. It's already in effect.
Okay.
So the MMO trash contract, Chalfont, send the MMO to Palumbo. That was the only things you mentioned, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. The other items you can read, 2 things I want to point out. We probably do not need a tax anticipation note, but I keep it here in my list just in case. And every year you always consider a citizenship award nominee. Now, last year you had suggested I think last year was Kay Potterly, and you suggested that you wanted to give it to Pat Lanigan, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go through my notes though and double check that, but you suggested there were 2 worthy people last year and you thought that the other one should get it in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. Does anybody recall that?
Yeah, Steve,
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, so Mr.
That is-
Morrill and Mr. Lawrence recall that. So I don't know that you need to really discuss that, but I will just double check my notes from last year and make sure I have the right person. And I'll put that on a future committee, probably for Ops and Policy, and make sure that you guys are okay with that and you can vote on that. So everything else you can read. I'm not going to go into any detail on this. The police pension contribution is another important thing. That usually is approved anytime October, November, or December, once Walk and Hop gives us the okay. That's where the police have to submit 5% or contribute 5%. I really don't have anything else to add to that unless you have any questions. I only have one other item. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because there's no real reason to Sure. The last item I just wanted to mention to you is I emailed you info today from the library, including their budget request for 2021, which I will take into consideration when I do the first draft of the budget, and will include in my budget message to you what they're requesting and what I showed that we could afford in the budget. Then you can take it from there and decide what you want to do. They also submitted a report for 2019, and I gave that both to you in an email today earlier. If you didn't get it, let me know. But in any case, their budget request will be discussed as part of the first draft budget in October under finance. And that's all I have if you have no questions.
Okay, on the library item, or item C, we got some other additional information that I would like Mr. Morris to send out to everybody that is associated with contributions by the various municipalities in the area that participate. I think you need to be aware of those numbers. I am always of the belief that in Forest Hills, we always seem to give more than our fair share to things such as this. So I will ask Mr. Morris to send out the numbers associated with us and Churchill and Wilkins Township, et cetera.
That was in the email, I believe, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, I'll forward that on.
I requested some information, and I wanted to bring it up tonight so that you get a hold of it and you can look at the numbers.
Can I
I'll
ask
get-
a
I'll
question?
get that out this week.
Besides the total amounts, can you also include per capita costs, the per capita payment they do?
You'll get the report, Marcus, and when it comes out, you at that time, you can ask questions when you see that, okay?
Does it include the per capita? The report should include it. You can just add it.
We'll be sending out the information, okay? When you get it, take a look at it, and then we'll discuss it later on. The information has to come out first.
I mean, it's an easy math. I don't understand what I just need the population number if you can.
You're going to see the contributions from each of the municipalities,
Yes.
the percentage that they use, and how much money they contribute to the program. So he's going to send that out. If you have any questions as to what's being sent out,
All I'm
Yes.
asking to include in that report is a line for each community, how many people are living there. I can Google it myself if I have to. I mean,
I don't have the report in front of me. He's going to send a report out with the numbers. Once you get those, if you have a question at that time, please ask. I can't answer the question at this time.
I'm just making a request if someone can include the per capita, like the cost. I can do it myself if I have to. I mean, I just need to someone Google Churchill, Wilkins, whatever, how many people are living there, and then make the math. It would take Steve 2 minutes. Thank you.
Steve, whatever he's requesting, send that out along with the other information, okay? Thank you. All right, solicitor's report. Mr. Corbel, can we break this down into 2 parts, please? Take the top part that you have in terms of the language, and let's address that first and get that taken care of. And then the second part below.
Sure, I think there's 3 parts, but I'll just do them in order. All right, so last time we met, council asked me to put together a statement, et cetera, with respect to individuals being permitted to respond to an entry of a log or an incident report. And that language is included in the agenda. It says individuals are permitted to submit a written statement to be appended to any log entry or incident report generated by the Forest Hills Borough Police, where the individual is named as an actor, victim, or witness. Now, I worked on this and I spoke to the chief. I know Chief's not on here, but I do want to thank him for taking his time with me to work through this to make sure that we are being very deliberate and all-encompassing here. And this is the language that I came up with, and the chief blessed it today. So Chief Williams is comfortable with that. And so from a council perspective, we should be adopting this by motion or, even a resolution at the meeting next week, if this is, if something council would like to do.
Okay.
We can
are there
also
any
revise the
questions on
language if
that?
there's an issue.
Any questions on that first part? So let's put that on the agenda for a motion.
I
Okay.
assume you'll write the resolution if I need a resolution, Mr. Corwell.
Yeah, we could do either way. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. So I'll take care of either way. Secondly, I did put a little editorialization in there. There was discussion at the last meeting about whether or not we should be notifying somebody if their name appeared in a log entry or a report. And looking into that a little deeper, I know we're all sort of just rapping and talking off the top of our heads. But I don't, ultimately, I think it's unwise to compel the police department to notify somebody that their name appears in a report for several reasons, not of all that are listed here, but it could compromise an ongoing investigation because somebody may not know that they are under investigation. And if we compel the police to tell them, that could cause a problem. It might violate the PA Criminal History Law Act. And we don't want to do that. It could also provide a disincentive to people to report criminal or suspected criminal activity. A lot of the things that we learn about in my discussions with the chief come from good citizens who are keeping their eyes out in our community, right? The police they do patrol the borough very methodically, but they're not everywhere at every moment. And we do count on our residents to speak up. And having their names appear as witnesses or people that called in the complaint, it could tip off somebody or make them less likely to do that civic act in the future. So I just wanted to let everybody know that those were my thoughts. And then lastly, the chief has put together a general order. I'm not sure if he spoke to you all about that during the public safety meeting last week. But the order that the chief drafted was very good. But in discussing it with him, I had one suggestion, and that's the underlined bolded text at the bottom of the agenda, which would just, to the extent that anybody who is related to the borough, whether it's an employee, an appointed official like me, an elected official like the members of council, employees like Mr. Morris, vendors for the borough that come to the borough building, contractors that are doing work. If there's ever a report, log entry, incident report, etc., that has anything to do with those folks, those groups of people, I thought that the chief's order should compel the officers to inform him immediately of that fact, because that could be an additional sensitive issue, and the chief should know what's happening, unlike recent situations where the chief was not aware that things were occurring until after the fact. And so I think this will help address any concerns moving forward where things are being entered into logs or reports, and it's not being shared with the chief when it relates to the borough. So I made that suggestion, and I think the chief was amenable to that, but I haven't seen a revised order. But that was just my suggestion. I wanted to let council know. I also copied the mayor on it, so the mayor's aware that was my suggestion as well. So that's all I have on my agenda for this evening, Mr. Tomasic. You're muted.
I'm sorry. What would we do with that second statement that you have? Is that just simply a policy that Chuck has in place along with the mayor?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question for Steve.
Yes.
I have to be careful how to phrase it. We have some potentially executive session material going on. What's the timing of that? Like, when do we going to have an executive session again to get an update?
I know what you're talking about. We may be able to I may be able to give you all a brief update next week, as I believe there's some activity ongoing this week and next. But I don't think that that issue will come to conclusion until next month at the earliest.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Just to touch on that as well, we do have upcoming negotiations with the police that are scheduled shortly. How should we be discussing that information per executive session because it involves negotiations?
Yeah, any strategy over negotiation should be discussed in executive session. There's two ways to do executive session now. We could do it in a setting like this, or you can have those executive sessions in person. I know we chose to have an executive session in person earlier this summer, related to the sensitive nature of the discussions. And it's certainly council's prerogative to make that call over the labor issues if you'd like to meet in person versus this medium. I do know that some of the restrictions have been, I don't want to say loosened, but they're not as strict as they have been. So, it's again up to council how comfortable you all feel, et cetera. And if you're not comfortable being in the room, if you'd want to have it in the room, we can always have folks on the phone. I think the mayor participated by phone the last time we got together. So totally up to you.
I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, how you want to go about this. So if you have any objections to meeting in person, please let Mr. Morris know. And we could do an in-person meeting and people could phone in rather than do it on a Zoom. I don't know if that's acceptable, and have some people in person and have some people on the phone, if that's what you want to do. I don't know. I really don't have a solution to the problem as to how to handle it. Patty?
I'd like to suggest that our council is well ventilated and well spaced. And I think for something as significant as planning labor negotiations, it might be helpful for us to be together. Wear masks and sit apart. I think for something like this, it's significant. I think for this, if it's possible. I think our council is
I agree.
better conditioned than many places for this kind of thing.
Okay, that being said, would you like to do the executive session after a committee meeting or after a council meeting or at some other time? Is there a preference there? So we could say, okay, we have 4 committee meetings next month on a Tuesday, whatever, October 1st. So would we want to plan having an executive session around the first or the second meeting, probably preferably the second, but we could still do the other meetings in Zoom. We would do this in person and then have the meeting afterward. Does that sound like a reasonable suggestion to the members of council?
Just a
That
thought.
works for me. This is Jack. That works for me.
The second committee meeting in October will be the budget meeting too, don't forget, so that may be longer. Just throwing that out.
Yeah, we should avoid that meeting, adding on anything to that. If we should do it on either the first meeting or do it after the council.
Yeah.
Mr. Gorham?
Do we have enough time to get everything wrapped up and together for next Wednesday?
I can't answer that question. I doubt it. How about if
it was more for Steve. If the timing doesn't work for next Wednesday, then maybe I don't know if we could wait until the following month's council meeting, which I think would be
15th, the 21st.
Yeah,
21st.
September 21st. Is that too late, Steve? Or
21st is late.
The first committee meeting night is October 6th, just so you know, that would be okay.
Yeah.
And then the
Okay, so-
business meeting is the 21st. I'm not saying you couldn't do it on the 13th, and certainly doing it by Zoom first and then coming up here for your exec session is not a big deal, but it might be a longer night that night because of the budget. Yeah, I don't know. It may not. Sometimes they're long, sometimes they're not.
I would shoot for the 6th or the 21st then, in my opinion.
Okay, what I'd like to do then, let's do it for the council meeting on the 21st. We generally wrap those up in pretty short order.
Okay.
I think we're around the maximum of an hour on those meetings. So let's plan on doing it at that time. And then we can decide if we're going to come to the meeting and have it in person and then have the executive session in person, or if you want to do a Zoom and then have the meeting in person afterwards. Can we go down that path as the two options?
Sounds good.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Okay. So if you have any particulars that you would like to have, like if you want to have a Zoom / in-person meeting on the 21st, then let Mr. Morris know if you would prefer an in-person council meeting and then that followed by the meeting, the Zoom and then the in-person meeting, let him know as well. That would be our two options.
And if it's,
That sound reasonable?
yeah, if it's not inconvenient, the 21st, you doing it by Zoom, that way you don't have to worry about the size of the audience. You can have as many people as might be interested in doing it first and then come up here for the exec session afterwards. That would allow more people to participate if you keep it on Zoom that way.
That's a good point, Steve.
Yes, I agree. So whatever you think, send something along to Mr. Morris in terms of what your preference would be, and then we'll make a decision, okay? But let's go with the 21st, and then it's either in person, or it's Zoom in person.
Sounds
Okay.
good to me. Sounds good to me.
All right, everybody? Okay, let's go down that path. Thank you all.
I have one issue I wanted to ask about, since it's committee of the whole.
Go ahead.
We were not able to hold our volunteer and employees appreciation picnic that we usually do at around this time of the year. I was wondering if we could send some sort of written note of appreciation to our staff and volunteers in lieu of having a picnic. It feels awful to not be thanking people who are working through all of this just because we can't all get together. And I don't know if anybody has an idea of what might be meaningful and appropriate, but I think it would be unfortunate to let the year pass without a statement of appreciation of our volunteers and staff.
I agree, and maybe you could work with Mr. Morris to compose something and then have it sent out.
Anybody
If
have
somebody
any
wants,
ideas?
somebody wants to draft something, we have the mail list.
Okay.
So we can just, we wouldn't do it individually per person, but we would just do a general one out and we could just put labels on. That's not necessarily a problem.
Patty, if you'd like to work with Mr. Morris on that, I'd appreciate it.
Anybody else? Tony, you're nodding. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, it sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, Mayor, you have any thoughts on this?
I do. Why don't we I think I'm going to be there Thursday night, Patty, for that safety meeting we have scheduled with the chief.
Okay.
Maybe we can hang around a little bit afterwards and kind of wordsmith something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good idea.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, the last item we have here, number 3, proposal requiring inspections of commercial and/or residential properties, requested by Mr. Lawrence. On this topic, we're going to follow the rules associated with discussions concerning items that come before us. Everybody will get one shot at stating their position, and then we will move on to the next person. There is no requirement for anybody to speak about it, but once we get through those who want to, that will be the end of the discussion. We're not going to have a back and forth or debate on the items. I think everybody understands where they want to be. So, Mr. Lawrence, I will let you start off because you're the one that requested the item be moved to the cow position. So you're
Okay,
first up
thanks.
if you want to speak.
And Yeah, you're hearing me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I just want to make sure I got all these mute buttons and I don't know what I'm doing here. Yes, very quickly, I did look over it, gave it a lot of thought, and I believe I would like to see the borough not get involved in the inspection business. I think that's a space where we really shouldn't be. And I'll make this very brief. I have two primary concerns with it. One is however we would structure it, and no matter how limited or extensive a representative of the borough, an employee of the borough, would be going around and inspecting, whether it's a small checklist or a very large checklist. One of my large concerns here is the liability that would create for the borough when we get into that business. Because at any time, if our employee or representative would make an error in an inspection, perhaps not identify a violation, and that caused some kind of damage, we would be among those who would be sued by the homeowner and anyone damaged. And that's going to create a liability expense for us. You know, even if we were eventually dropped out of the lawsuit, we're going to have to be paying our attorneys to represent us. And I believe that would be an inevitability of an approach like this and getting ourselves into the inspection business. The second one I think is particularly relevant as we're looking at the budget issues. There's no question that we would have to bring on additional labor. I don't know if it would be part-time or full-time. If it was full-time, we're looking at benefits. And this is certainly, I think, an issue that we don't want to be adding another considerable line item to the borough budget at this point, probably at any point. But I am very concerned about the liability. And then very quickly, finally, I have some real deep concerns about the notion of us getting involved in the inspection business and intervening in the private contractual arrangements between two people, two private citizens in the borough transferring property. So just those 3 points, I'll just lay it out there. It may be after everyone has thrown their ideas out, Mr. Corbel may have some background that may help us also. Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak to the issue?
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, I think it's something we're gonna, at some point, no matter what, we're probably gonna have to get involved in. That we don't have them already kind of perplexes me, really, when almost everyone else does. The codes, all you're looking for is things in the International Building Code, International Fire Code, things like that are basic across the board. And you're really only inspecting, at least in my opinion, the only time we should be inspecting anything is when it's for sale. And all these items they're contingent on that sale going through. You need to make sure you have a fire door in your basement, smoke detectors, things like that. The things we already look for in rental inspections that we already have. And building underwriters, you know, our building inspector would take care of that. And the fee for the inspection would cover the wages that he needs to be out there. So I don't think there's any increase in cost at all. Another thing we're going through right now, the fire department's ISO rating is up for review, the Insurance Service Office, which that rating affects everyone in the boroughs, more so commercial properties as well, insurance premiums. The more worse rating you have, the more money you pay in insurance. So we're trying to lower our rating right now, which for a volunteer department, we still have a good rating of 4. We're trying to at least get to a 3 currently. We lost a lot of points. I talked to the building inspector myself, and I mean, I've done this before. I had the paperwork. We lost a lot of points because of our inspection programs are so lacking compared to an average, you know, nationally. You know, they want you to be at a certain point, I mean, mainly for safety of the community and safety of the residents, and we are way below that point. So, I mean, I don't think this is that big of a deal to start doing, but, you know, that's just my opinion. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Marcus?
I think we're duplicating something which is already in place. When you buy a building, you usually have a building inspector looking at your house anyway. I think most commercial people buying a house have to have a building inspector involved. So I think we're taking on something which is already there. That's all I had to say.
Patty?
I was concerned also that we do inspections for rentals, and I think pretty much the same check. I talked to Dave about this. It's pretty much the same checklist that you use for rental inspections, just for safety and fire assurance. And I think it would help everybody's insurance rates if we have that kind of a process. Also, at some point, we may want to use this process as a way to help people examine upgrades for energy efficiency or sidewalk safety or things like that in the future, if we have a basic checklist program in place. I'm not looking at anything elaborate, but I think the basic standards that are in the same thing we do for rental safety and security would be about what would be right.
Anyone else?
Yes, I would like to touch on this.
Go ahead.
I'd like to go back to Marcus's comment in regards to you have a building inspection. No, it's a home inspection. So the home inspector comes in and tells you you should fix this, this, and this. They don't require you to fix anything. You just bought a house. You just shelled out 5 to 20% to put down. The person may not have enough money to put a fire door in, but they put the smoke detectors in, but maybe not the fire door. So I brought this up in the past before. A home inspection and an occupancy inspection, they're two different things. Yeah, a person doesn't even have to pay for a home inspection. I've purchased numerous homes. I've never paid for one home inspection. But in every other municipality around Forest Hills, that's Wilkins, Churchill, Turtle Creek, Braddock Hills, they all require an occupancy inspection before I can even purchase the property. So I get a checklist from Dave, actually. I just bought one in Churchill. I got a checklist from Dave. These things need to be completed before you can move in or before you could resell the property. So this is a checklist to, like Thomas said, is to keep the neighbors and the community safe. I mean, and it's simple stuff like fire doors, smoke detectors, GFI outlets, but it's other things like maybe he finds a gas line that was run wrong and it's run above ground or something and it could be hit. I mean, he's come to me already numerous times and said that he's been driving past houses that have sold and the decks are not even built properly and they're in bad shape and they weren't built properly. So if someone walks out their back deck of their new house, they could fall 3 stories down. So I think everyone, and I agree with Thomas too, this isn't going to be any more money. And I completely disagree with Jack. Jack, there's no liability. Building underwriters, they're all certified. These guys, they inspect houses for every other borough, every other municipality around us. They do this every day. This isn't something new. It's not like we'd have to train Dawn to do this. These guys are trained and this is all they do. So I am completely for doing this in the borough and I 100% back. We need an occupancy inspection. We already have a rental inspection. Why don't we have an occupancy inspection before a rental inspection? I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. We should have an occupancy inspection before you have a rental inspection. That's my opinion. And
anyone else that hasn't spoken yet? Okay, I will now finish this up. First of all, I'm completely opposed to the government getting in between the purchase of one house by another person. We don't need to be involved in that. We're talking about rentals. It's a completely different issue because you have a third party who is going in there and they're in and out sometimes in less than a year. When I bought my houses, I got fire insurance. The fire insurance company did not come in and inspect my house. They drove up to the curb, looked at the house, and gave me fire insurance. So if those guys aren't interested in an inspection, I can't see why I would have to be. Going through some of these items, you have to get an inspection before you can sell your house. So now I have to set up an appointment. I'm an 85-year-old widower or widow, and now I have to get on the phone, call up the borough, get an appointment. You then have to come and give me an inspection. So you might look at something that's been safe for me for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years living in a house, but because it doesn't meet the current conditions of a new building, you're going to deny me the ability to be in that because it's, quote, a safety issue. So now I get the list. I have to call possibly an electrician for something as simple as an outlet box in which the electric guys have changed 3 times since I've been buying houses myself, in which, first of all, you had to get a box, then you had to get a GFI, now you have to get a bubble. So something that I put in 10, 15 years ago that was completely acceptable to the code is now unacceptable to the code. So I met the requirements at the time, now they're no longer valid. So now I have to call up an electrician. In COVID times, good luck with getting that. Or you talk about the fire door. I don't understand the problem with the fire door because almost all of the fires, most of the fires that occur, the majority, happen in the kitchen. Cooking fires. There's so few that are associated with garages and so on. And if that garage goes up, that door's, I don't care what it is, you're going to die from inhalation of carbon monoxide or get burned in the fire. So those are some of the things that I'm concerned about. Now, after I get that, and by the way, every list is different. So if you get a list from someplace over in Aspinwall, that might be different from our list here in Forest Hills. They're completely arbitrary and capricious. I saw one where they're talking about peeling paint has to be repaired. So you have some painting walls. That's one of the items that you negotiate when you go in to buy a house. You look at it and the first thing people say is the whole place needs painted. So you discuss that back and forth with the seller. All right, now, let's say you have some major issues. You're 85 years old, you're a widower, and you're sitting there and somebody says, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. So now I end up having to get contractors to come into my house to upgrade it to your conditions, which didn't exist when I bought the house, but now are required because the borough got themselves involved. Not because of the fire company or the insurance company. They didn't come in there and say, oh, well, these are issues you have to worry about in terms of a fire. If it was such an important safety issue, I think that they would be inside making sure that these things are done. And they're not. Now, let's say that I run into a major issue. Let's say there's a problem with some kind of concrete in my driveway and it's uneven or whatever. So you come in there and say, well, you can't sell your house until that concrete that's going to cost you $5,000 in your driveway is repaired. Where am I going to get the money from? I'm on Social Security. Do I have to go out and borrow it? But who's going to lend me the money? And then after I have to sit there, I have to call up all these contractors. I have to get all this work done, which could be thousands of dollars. And you've put me through all of this stuff because you're telling me now that my house, which when I bought it and whatever I put in there was certified and up to code, now because you want to go by the new standards that are updated, I can't sell my house. That's an infringement upon these people. So not only did you put me in a bad space at the beginning because I have to come to you before I can sell my house, all right? Now I might not be able to sell it. I'm in a bind because I can't afford to do all of these things that you're telling me I have to do, and you, as the borough, are the ones stopping me. It's like saying, okay, I want to sell my car, but it doesn't have an airbag in it. Well, it was built in 1980. So you're telling me, oh, well, you have to put an airbag in there before you can sell your car. And I consider that to be an analogy that compares what we're talking about doing here to what we're talking about in terms of a buyer and a seller reaching an agreement between two parties. So that is what I have to say. And that's the end of the discussions.
Mr. Tomasic,
Hold on. No, there is not going to be any more discussions. You want to talk to somebody, do it privately.
No,
The discussion is ended.
I have something to say. I have something to add to that.
You should not get involved.
I said that the rules were going to be one person speaks, you get your time, and you're done. You're out of order.
I just want to let you know that you are Mr.
Okay, I haven't said anything yet. I haven't
You-
said
I just want to,
You're done. The
I want to let you know
discussion
that
is
you are
over. Discussion
misinformed.
is over.
I want to let you know that you're
Mute him,
misinformed.
please. Whoever's
No.
got the mute button, mute him.
You're misinformed.
I need to say something.
It's that simple.
I need to say
Because
something.
the buyer could correct those
Is
things. You
anybody
can
in
still sell the
control of
I
house.
don't think we should get involved. I don't think we should get involved. Bill.
Okay, Bill, you said your piece.
Is 100% right. I should think we should not get involved in preventing a person from moving on to sell their house because it's something that they've invested in, they've kept up. I think it's their world, and they should be able to sell it if they want to.
And they can, and the buyer, the new buyer.
As I
can
said,
make
who's
those
in control of the
changes.
mute?
Okay, I'm allowed to
Mute
speak.
him, please.
You're gonna end the discussion when you're done? I mean, no.
Did you hear, who's in control of the mute?
I just said a comment.
E- Everything is over.
May we hear from Mr. Corbel, please?
Mr. Corbel, you haven't spoken yet. Please speak if you wish to address these issues. And if you don't, you don't have to, but this will be the last comment.
Listen, this is a policy issue that council has to decide. I'm happy to answer any questions. But I'm not here to get in the middle of this debate. But happy to answer any questions.
Question for Mr. Corbel.
Yes, Patty?
Mr. Corbel, do we have an increased liability exposure from having a checklist of occupancy certification for purchase of property?
In my experience, the answer to that question is yes. That if we are inspecting based on a checklist and you miss something, there could be a liability issue. Now, the borough does have a contractor that is doing the work, perhaps. I mean, obviously, we haven't even figured out if BIU is going to do it, et cetera. But I represent communities that do this, and they are sued every couple years, for things they missed, or for things that they don't even inspect, like bad foundations. And then you got to pay the money to the lawyers to get you out. I mean, it's an insurance issue, but it does make their rates go up on their insurance when they submit claims over time. So, my view is that there is a legal liability issue if you take on the duty to inspect properties. If you miss something, then it's your fault if something goes wrong, right? If we inspect and say the electrical outlets were okay and they weren't, and there's electrical fire, that could be an issue for us.
Steve, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Along those lines. So when you're saying we, so I'm sure there's legal language that we could draft and put that on to BIU. BIU does this in every community around us. I think they do it for Turtle Creek. They do it for Wilkins. They do it for, like I said, Churchill. I just had Dave inspect one of my new properties I just purchased. So there has to be language that every other municipality is using to push that onto BIU as the subcontractor. That's the first thing. The second thing is in your experience of sitting on councils, is there any other municipality that does not do an occupancy inspection in 2020?
I'll take the first one first. The answer is yes. There are lots of municipalities in Allegheny County that don't conduct occupancy inspections, but there are a lot that do. And then with respect to the other issue about, having BIU indemnify the borough, et cetera. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously we can put that kind of language together, but they have to agree to it. I know they're doing inspections in another community where I work, and there is no agreement. They would not agree to an agreement, but maybe they would here. I don't know. But that doesn't mean that the borough won't be sued, right? Like you're talking about the merits of the case, Bill, and I can't tell Joe or Susie homeowner that they can't sue us. they will, and then we turn it over to our insurance, and the lawyer says, well, we didn't do it, it was our contractor, and, you know, we'll probably get out of that case, but you still have to pay a lawyer who still has to write a brief and go to court and maybe be part of an appeal. So there's still money and expense there, no matter how tight you button things up on the legal side of things.
Okay, one further question, then I'm done. Does Ross Township have a occupancy inspection?
We do not.
Surprising. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that ends the conversation. Everybody's had an opportunity. Okay, so that ends the meeting. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.